Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Deltana number 12EF. This is their heavy-duty solid brass extension flush bolt. This is in the B or the BU19 finish, and that means black. This would be a powder coat. I'm sure it would be a powder coat. They're sold as each. This client ordered two, so there's two in this box. And let's take a closer look at this flush bolt. Let's remove it from the packaging. This typical flush bolt is going to be a standard design. It's going to be something that you're going to find very compatible with lots of installations. This is the first time I'm ever looking at a Deltana flush bolt. It does certainly look a little bit different than standard flush bolts, just in the way that the faceplate is scalloped out, I should say. The flip mechanism, or the lever itself, is a little different design. The back of the assembly is a little different design as well. I will tell you that it doesn't operate as smooth as other manufacturers' bolts. It's likely because the paint adds a certain mill thickness to everything. I'm going to say this is not powder coated. Or maybe it's just the design. The parts move a little rough. Does take extra force. May not be really ultimately... Yeah, I definitely don't like that design. Deltana is by and large a company that manufactures very good quality products. However, when the bolt is thrown, you should not be able to manipulate it down. That would be a problem. This I can certainly manipulate. So if it's at the bottom of the door, I should be able to lever that open. That's not good. You would not find that to be the case with other manufacturers' flush bolts, certainly. Having said that, it may not be an issue for you that occurs. This does have a standard footprint. It's 6 3/4 tall, and it's 1 inch wide. That's going to be typical and standard. It's going to include with it its rod, and I'm going to check to see what thread type this is, because this is coming out of Asia. It may not be 1/4-20. I'm going to check. So I did step away and grab a 1/4-20 nut, and this does thread down just perfectly onto it. Now, the reason that's important to know what thread size you're dealing with, it's because of this reason. You have an 8-foot tall door. This, in the extended description, is called 12-inch rod extension. Nowhere on this rod would it really measure 12-inch. I mean, the rod itself does not measure 12-inch. You've got this bolt head that can be removed, or adjusted, I should say. You really wouldn't remove it. The point of the matter is you have 12 inches a reference to what would be the top of the door or the bottom of the door to the center of the faceplate. Well, that's fine if you have a 7-foot door or a 6'8" tall door, because most of us will reach up and be able to grab this lever when it's 12-inch from the top of a 7-foot door. Not so if it's an 8-foot door. Or 9-foot. The point of the matter is you can order from us 1/4-20 threaded rod. You can cut it to length and really achieve any top dimension that suits. Even very occasionally someone will want a bottom rod lifted up as well, but that's very atypical. But be mindful that that's 1/4-20, and it gives you the information necessary to be able to know exactly what you're dealing with. Now this, in my opinion, this fatal flaw aside, and you'll note this is not UL listed. Yeah, okay. So there is a link below this video to the cut sheet. The cut sheet refers to the different rod lengths. I had not looked at that prior at all. So be mindful that longer rod lengths can be ordered. It's not UL listed, and that means It's possible it was tested and found to be insufficient. Maybe the internal components degraded in a fire test to such a point where that bolt literally failed. Okay, very possible. And then maybe they didn't want to redesign the entire bolt to achieve a UL listing. What that means for you, however, is if you have a fire-rated door, this is not to be installed on a fire-rated door. Not that it's not to be installed. If every part of what's on the door is not listed and or labeled, you don't have a fire-rated door. The door will be fire-rated, the frame might be fire-rated, but if all components aren't compliant, it would be determined that you do not technically meet the criteria for a fire-rated opening. So be mindful of that. Don't install this on a fire-rated door. This would be a good option, I would think, on an interior door where you're looking to just keep a inactive door closed. You're not concerned about someone knowing that they can manipulate this bolt into the unlatched or unbolted position, which you can clearly do with this. Wouldn't take a lot of work to do that. So I would say for an interior application where you don't think someone's going to try to break in by circumventing the design of the bolt is going to happen. It is an attractive finish. It's a little rough to manipulate. I expect that'll get smoother as you use the bolt more and more. But it is, it is a flush bolt. It's going to include its rod to achieve that 12-inch size. It has its bolt head. It has this double D sort of preparation, and that's because the top plate, or again the bottom plate, is going to ride in that double D prep. That's there so that it doesn't turn or rotate on you. You don't want it to move at all, because if it does, it could become loose from the threaded rod, ultimately fall off the door. The rod can fall away, things of that nature. Along with that guide is going to be a strike. That'll be mortised into the header or down onto the floor. Overall length is about 2 3/16. Overall width of that strike is 15/16. Back to the guide. That's going to have an overall length of 2 inch and a width of 1 inch. We measured the plate itself. We know about the rod and its bolt head. The other thing that you're going to get will be screws in a complementary finish. Okay, you're going to have 4 long screws, 4 short screws. These are only wood thread type screws. I would certainly say that I would really use the short screws for all of it. I'm not sure where they want you to run these 1.5-inch long screws into. I would not put them into the door myself. I would personally use the short screws for the door portion. Don't want to drill into that door any further than necessary. Having extra hardware in there, probably isn't necessarily a good thing. Regardless of how you put the screws, what I'm trying to say is I've never seen a flush bolt packaged with such long screws. You're going to need to use those somewhere. If it was me, I would probably just simply try to use them in the frame, because the frame is very likely just hollow, or based on the length of the screws that I think, now that I think of it, yeah, they are 1.5 inches. If you've got a 3/4 inch jamb, you might be able to get through the jamb and into the stud behind it, depending on that gap. If it's a 1/4 inch, you'd probably get the screw in the header, if it's a wood frame, into the stud, into the header, the rough header above. That could be advantageous, certainly, to have the screw go through there. However you decide to put them in, I would absolutely pre-drill the hole very well. Your pre-drill size needs to be about 80% of the root size of the screw itself, not including the threads, just the root of the screw. You don't want to split anything. Certainly, if it's it's going to be a wood door, I'm quite sure of it. If it is a steel door, you're going to need to come up with some machine screws, and I highly doubt Deltana is going to be able to help us with machine screws for these. Now, we're going to talk about the extended description real quick. Designed with a unique cam mechanism which allows a smooth open-closing action, eliminates springs which can break or jam. Yeah, flush bolts do have a flat spring, and I can certainly, and flat springs do break. The amount of times I've seen a spring in a flush bolt break is, I do not have a memory of ever knowing that that has occurred. 30 years of selling flush bolts, I can't think of a single time a flat spring in a flush bolt broke. Maybe once. Guide design and flat side of the bolt head prevents the bolt from turning. That's this double D prep. Okay, flush bolt, rod, screw, strike plate, and guide plate. Now, installation of this material. If you are installing this into a, obviously I'm thinking a wood door, you are certainly going to want to order the material, your door, your inactive door, machined or prepped at the shop, the factory, your distributor, whoever is ordering it. Prepping a lever extension style flush bolt in the field is, in a lot of instances, not realistic. I have mortised, machined, prepped. I've built doors specifically for these myself. If you're going to take a stock door and prep it for this kind of flush bolt, which you can do, you really will find it all but impossible to do so without the right tools. What I mean is this. You can understand you're going to have to mortise 6 3/4 by 1. The preparation for this flush bolt itself is actually going to be very simple with your router. You're going to have two preparations that you're going to do. Okay? You're going to do two preparations. You're going to prep for the body and then the plate. You're going to do the body prep first. The body is going to be from somewhere up in this area, below the screws and above the mechanism, down to somewhere above these screws and below this mechanism, and then the width of this. The second best friend of the carpenter, in my opinion, is the caliper, or the journeyman woodworker. So I can measure this width of the body, and it'll tell me 0.729. So I'm thinking I'm going to go with like maybe a 3/4 inch width here. My depth of the body has got to be deep enough to be able to get all of this installed. So I'm going to make my body prep the deepest, or the thickest portion of this, and it looks like it's about 0.84. So I would realistically be looking to mortise this 7/8 deep, something in that range. And that's going to give me, and then the length of this, which you want to stay well clear away from the screws. You do realize that you're going to have a round bit, of course, so in order to not necessarily square corners, I might make that a 5-inch long prep. 5-inch long, the width I mentioned, the depth I mentioned. Now that's going to give you the ability to drop that body in there. Your second prep, the plate preparation, is going to be the thickness of the plate here. It's going to be the width and then the length. And that thickness is 0.151. 0.151 thick. You can see that there's a stepped preparation to this. So you're going to make it 0.151, 1 inch wide, 6 3/4 long. You're going to skim that plate prep out. Now your body's going to fit perfectly into the door. Okay, that's the easy part. The hard part is going to be drilling this from the top of the door all the way down the door. So close. What's that going to be? 3/4 inch from here to here? Drill that all the way down to get that rod to be able to be inserted from the top of the door or the bottom of the door through. You can get an 18-inch, bell hanger's bit. The problem is how you're going to drill that. Well, they do make drill guides for doing it, and I own one. I've owned I've owned 3 of them in my career. I've done it, again, literally dozens, if not hundreds of times. And that preparation works. You can make it work, and it will always work. Occasionally, however, you have a failure because, depending on the door construction, you can have really disparate construction where you might have solid lumber here of a certain density. You might have a void back here between the style of the door and its core. You could have it all bonded, but you could have a dense wood here, like say maple or cherry, and then you've got the particle board down there, and even though that there's no void, you've got really dense material backed by really hollow material, particle board. What's that drill bit going to want to do naturally? It's going to want to seek the less dense material. And if you're literally trying to drill the seam between the maple and the particle board, you're going to find that it's practically impossible to get that through. And you're going to run the risk of damaging the door, piercing up through it, or piercing out it, which can happen, especially in the hands of an inexperienced person. And we would routinely select a door that had a thicker, more generous style, if possible, to make those the inactive doors on a job. The bottom line is, if you don't own any of the tools, don't try to do it. Order your door prepped for it. However, if you're a carpenter, an installer, and you've got the tools and the knowledge, have at it. It's no big deal. But it just depends on where you are, where you fall into play on the idea of doing it yourself. So the Deltana flush bolt, this is, again, the first time I've seen one of these. I'm less than enamored with its function. It's the fact that I now knowingly can circumvent the security of the bolt. It's also the fact that it's not UL listed. So residential applications only, interior applications only, where you're not concerned with somebody breaking in and manipulating the bolt. And it might seem a bit inane to go to the extent to mention all of that. You know, it's 99% of everything is pretty typical and straightforward. It's that 1% that really makes things odd. You'd be able to have a door opened up and very likely very little evidence of how it was circumvented. So be mindful. Having said all of that, I don't like to say anything negative about a manufacturer, and I don't believe that I've said anything negative, but I have pointed out where you would and should not, certainly will not use it. Fire-rated doors, exterior doors. Where you will would be interior wood doors. Having said all of that, Deltana is an excellent company. Their quality is very good. They are an importer of mostly solid brass hardware, very good fit and finish. Their stock levels are generally incredibly deep, and they're backed by people who pick up the phone and give you the answer. That kind of routine. And that's really all that you want. Their inventories are generally deep, and it would be because I imagine they're bringing in this material from Asia in containers. So when they bring in black flush bolts, they probably aren't bringing in 50 pair. They're probably bringing in 2,000 pair, where their inventory sits on the shelf in deep quantities because of the reorder multiple. So the point is, they're either very deep and have plenty of what you're asking for, or they're out of stock and it's going to take 14 weeks before it comes in again. That sort of routine. I generally find the former, where they have everything that we need in stock. Occasionally you get an order for 2,000 of something and they've only got 800. They'll happily order it, but it's going to be several weeks, a dozen or more weeks to get more material in. However, their fit and finish is very excellent, and they supply material that has become difficult to obtain. If you look through their product catalog, below this video is a link to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up all the Deltana we sell, a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. You're going to see hardware that domestic manufacturers used to make. In fact, you'll see hardware that domestic manufacturers likely invented 100 plus years ago. But those same domestic manufacturers no longer offer it. So you're looking at companies like Deltana to fill the void, and they do it very well. If you have any questions on the 12EF lever extension flush bolt or any other Deltana product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.